Hi, I'm Greg Soul, and this is Why Am I, a conversation podcast where I find interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. This go around, my guest is Jennifer Mosquera. She's an artist that started as a vet, pivoted to earth science, took a pit stop as a lawyer, and eventually found her home making amazing interactive art experiences. This is someone who, while they know who they are, isn't afraid of change, and I love that. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jennifer. Jennifer Mosquera, thank you so much for joining me on the Why Am I podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
For sure. We just, I don't usually talk about this, but we just had a fantastic fantasy restaurant meal. I hope you guys check it out. For you guys that don't understand how it works, you join us on Patreon, and then you get access to all these cool behind the scenes stuff where you get to see Jennifer basically kill herself, I would say. You murdered yourself from one allergy to the next, so that was a lot of fun.
Many times. I'm surprised we only had one drink and we didn't have like 4 or 5, but you know, the food had to be involved.
Excellent. So normally how I start these things off, or traditionally I would introduce you, talk a little bit about you, but I don't want to do that anymore. I want you to speak your truth. So you and I are standing in line. Where are we? We are at the grocery store, and you're buying a cart full of cheeses and very glutinous bread. And, you know, it's a big backup. And so we're just having a conversation, and I tell you where I work and what I do and just kind of about me. And then it's your turn to reciprocate. So who are you, Jennifer?
Well, I am an artist here in Denver, Colorado. I am one of the co-founders to a company called Prismagic. We build immersive art experiences, and we have built 2 that were open to the general public at this point. The first one was called Natura Obscura, and that one was hosted at the Museum of Outdoor Arts in Inglewood in 2019. And we currently have one that's going right by City Park at 21st in York called Cheeky Dreams, which is a much smaller, intended to be a pop-up experience that we launched last year right before COVID hit. And so we're still running that, and it's still our intermediary step in between where we've been and where we're going, which is hopefully very soon finding a large permanent facility in the Denver metro area.
All right. So there was a lot to unpack there. First you started.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot.
Yeah. So you're an artist in Denver. How did you end up settling in Denver?
You know, I came to Colorado in 1995 after I graduated from Virginia Tech. And I came here for law school. And I went to the University of Denver, which I affectionately call DU. and I ended up becoming an assistant district attorney under Bill Ritter when he was the DA here, and practiced for 3 years. And so that was kind of my first version of myself in Colorado.
First version of myself. So when you went to college, you did undergrad somewhere, right? And then you went to be a lawyer. So what was your undergrad stuff?
My undergrad, well, I went to Virginia Tech with the hopes of becoming a veterinarian. And my first week as in the pre-vet program at Virginia Tech, they wanted me to castrate a pig. And I'm more of a lover than I am a fighter. And so I changed my major and changed everything to environmental resource management within the forestry department at Virginia Tech. So, I have an undergrad degree in environmental resource management slash forestry.
That's interesting. So holy cow, we are all over the place already. We're just
buckle up.
Shotgun approach. I dig it. So what made you think you wanted to be a vet to begin with?
Oh, I love animals dearly. Always have since I was really little. But I'm much more a lover of animals than a fixer of animals, which they quickly taught me there. So it changed my path completely, 180.
I'm assuming that's kind of a rites of passage thing, right? Just to make sure that people want to be there. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. As I understand it, there's no knife or anything involved. It's more of a rubber band approach to the cojones of whatever animal you're going to
As I understand
castrate.
it. So you're saying you didn't get very far down the process. As soon as you figured that out,
Week 1, I was like, nope, I'm shifting my major. And I think I landed in the forestry school because the majors were kind of on the same science paths, like earth sciences type of thing, biology, that sort of thing, which was the strength of mine from forever. Very interested in nature, always.
Got you. Nature and biology. So that kind of sounds hippie-ish to me. Is that how you describe yourself?
Parts of me are totally hippie. Yeah. I'm a vegetarian, for Pete's sake. I'm a big, I believe in animal rights. I believe that they're sentient creatures. And I would say parts of me, spirituality wise, kind of the hippie thing. This might be controversial to some, and no offense to meant, but I like to shower. So that part's maybe not as hippie.
So you dabble in the hippie arts.
Yes. Perfect. Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. I mean, that's totally, so I'm assuming this comes from your childhood. So you must've had lots of pets and played around in nature and stuff like that a lot, huh?
All the time. Climbing trees. I was a total tomboy. Lots of pets, rabbits, dogs, cats. I have currently 2 little dogs. I've had a hedgehog in my in my earlier 40s. I had a hedgehog.
Those things are so cute.
They are so cute. He was an asshole, but he was still cute. His name was Elvis Abernathy Jones, and you'd go near him and he'd like bristle out and kind of hiss at you a little bit, but I still loved him. Deep love.
And he's like the size of the palm of your hand, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, he's putting on airs. I see.
He's fronting.
That's right. Wilding out over there. So I'm assuming your parents were your enablers with all this animal stuff, right?
My mother was, definitely. She still has a herd of small, tiny dogs around her. We always had animals. My father was like, at one point he was importing fish from Germany, discus fish, and he had these tanks of fish everywhere. At one point they had made up their mind in their retirement they were going to have a llama farm and an alpaca farm.
Sweet.
So it's always part of it. But for me, they were just like my little sidekicks. And yeah, the animals were just like my little friends that I brought around. So when I was confronted with the fact that I had to castrate something, I was like, you don't do that to a friend.
Well, I mean, they're not really your friends if you don't know their names and all that stuff. So,
do no harm, Greg.
Professional distance, it's like,
right.
No names. We're good.
Yeah, but I'm an artist, so boundaries are not my strength.
I'm not good with boundaries either. I have this problem where I will ask somebody anything because I'm absolutely okay with reciprocating. People can ask me, but I've come to realize most humans don't feel or think that way.
I know, unfortunately. It would be so much easier to get to know somebody if you could just ask the questions that are deep down inside, and you're going to find out eventually if you're going to like hang out with the person. So it's better to know up front, in my opinion. But yeah, people aren't nearly that transparent.
I was going to say, hang out with a person. I feel like within 5 minutes, you're going to be dropping some bombs pretty fast.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that there's not a profanity moratorium here. I hope there's not, no. Because things start to flow, and I'm not in charge of that energy. I'm just a conduit for it.
Yeah. It just comes through you. Is that right? You're just channeling it?
Totally.
Oh my God.
Totally.
I am fairly bad about that as well. But I have this thing where I can put on a hat where I'm like, I'm at my job, and so I can shut it off for the most part, or I'm around my kids for the moment. I can shut it off. But, There's always cracks in the dam. You can only put so much duct tape on that stuff. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about it.
Let it be. Let it be.
So you also are very arty. So I'm assuming you did a lot of artistic stuff when you were a child too, right?
Yes, that was, I was super active, but then I was also very internal. And so I remember being 4, sitting at the dining room table, and there was light coming through the shears, and there was like a whole candlescape on there. And I remember spending what felt like hours, who knows what the time was, but spent hours shading, drawing the candles and shading them. And just feeling a really big sense of pride in doing that and taking the time and like perfecting it and polishing it at 4. And I remember showing my mother, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's nice." And it was almost gutting, I was like, "This is a masterpiece." So it was really important to me at that time. And I consistently created, mostly drawing, mostly 2D, though 3D as well, throughout my whole life, right into when I was practicing law. But then it abruptly stopped when I was practicing law.
Interesting. So so you did a lot of your earth sciences, your biology stuff, and then you decided, I'm going to be a lawyer. It doesn't seem like you just get a fortune cookie and it says, maybe you should try law. What brought you to that?
Well, I'm a child of an immigrant from South America. My dad's from Colombia, Bogota. He came here in the 60s to the United States, and he was a doctor already, and then he had to redo everything to become a doctor here. And I think it was at his urging, mandate maybe, that we were all 4 of us kids were to kind of pursue things not like art, things with solid paychecks and that sort of thing. And so I remember distinctly being asked when I think I was like in 8th grade, "What do you want to do when you grow up? Who do you want to be? What do you want to be?" And I was like, "I want to be an artist. I want to go to art school." And that was shut down immediately. And so him being a very macho individual from South America, where it was 30 years socially behind what was going on here, that became the filter by which I saw things in my art practice, and even took some classes I took 1 or 2 classes in college. So it was forever by my side during my journey.
It's always interesting to me because children of immigrants, I've seen that before too, where there's like this strong sense of, you have to go and be successful and do all this stuff. And so that's one life that you live at home, and then you go out at school and to the rest of the world. And you know how America is. We're just all over the place here. And so I'm sure that was a really strange dichotomy to kind of live those 2 lives.
It was, we all live different lives. We all have different facets of who we are inside, right? And so certainly surviving the home environment, it was important to be able to, follow that path of this kind of more professional, air quotes, way of being. But the essence of who I was really based in kind of this feral kid climbing trees, looking at things, inspecting them, creating things. And it was the part of me, kind of like that 4-year-old drawing at the table. And when I saw what I had created, that was the part that I thought was the most sacred and I was the most proud of. It's where my spirit comes from. It does not come from the law and picking a jury. It does not come from that. It comes from like the energy that comes through me when I'm connecting with nature or creating something, or even playing, like playing restaurant with you. All of those things are where the joy comes from and the energy comes from. It's not the academic gymnastics that you have to do to, in a lot of ways, participate in our society.
Well, something you said there that I really loved was playing restaurant. I'm going to maybe rename it to Let's Play Restaurant. But
Yeah.
aside from that, you've said this sort of multiple times and maybe in different ways that there you just said connecting with nature and that kind of that energy flows through you. Do you really feel like an emotional connection? Is it something tangible that you feel whenever you're doing that stuff?
I think it is. But for what I'm coming to understand is, I think a lot of people think connection is something where it's a strong feeling where, you feel it, like it's like kind of front and center. And what I've found is my connection with nature is this very subtle, soft thing that's calming and grounding. And I have tended in my life to be kind of riding the anxiety roller coaster all the time and amping everything up. And the older I've gotten, the less I've found that to serve myself. And I find the softer things, the things that fill me up without shaking me up, are the things that are actually more important for my longevity and how I feel and maintaining a positive mindset and the energy that I need. So within that kind of parameter, I think that's my connection with nature. It calms and soothes me. I can kind of let go and lean back a little bit instead of leaning in. And that's what the connection feels like. Never thought I had it before, because I was always used to leaning in and thinking that's where connection was, but it's actually not. I'm learning for myself.
That's interesting. There's so much to unpack there. So, one is the anxiety roller coaster. I think that is such a poetic way of saying the way I've lived most of my life. It's like this cyclical thing where you just get overloaded and overwhelmed, and then eventually it will ebb, but then it's always coming back and you just never quite know when it's coming in. The idea of leaning in. So I'm curious about that too. Like, what do you mean there? Like, you're leaning in, you're forcing it, you're making this thing happen, you're, just white knuckling it, grabbing hold of it, as opposed to leaning back where it's more just letting the things come to you and sort of interacting in that fashion, or what do you mean?
Yeah, perfectly said. Yeah. I mean, it's like if I wanted something, very much go after it, go get it. I was primed by watching my father, after he came to the United States, learn English, then had to build a whole new practice here. And he was leaning in, very, very masculine energy. Go for it, go after it. I think when I was very little, my mother told me that I wouldn't even let him hold me because I was always asleep when he was home. And so I didn't know who he was at first. So he leaned in very much, and that was a work ethic that he instilled in all of us. And I didn't know that there was another way to be. And it wasn't until after I start finding out I have all these food allergies and my body basically said no more of this leaning in, that I had to learn a different way of being. Is how do you move forward without leaning in? And so it's been a process of learning how to receive and feeling enough so that you didn't always have to go after it, to get where I'm starting to be much more mindful and healthy about how I move forward in the world and how I take the work that I'm supposed to create. And it's counterintuitive to, I think, also how in our American culture we see things. It's like, go get it and work hard and all of that. And it's not that I don't work hard, but I work differently than how I thought that meant before.
I mean, there's definitely, I've always felt like this pressure, like I'm not doing enough. I'm never completing enough. I've never got enough things going. And it's just like this slow simmer of anxiety that like there's always something I need to be doing. And it's a lot of times it would keep me from enjoying the things I am doing now. Cause it's like all the stuff I had been working for last year, I've got now, and I don't take the time to appreciate it because I'm too worried about the stuff that I need to accomplish for next year. And it's such a shit cycle to find myself in. And I was my own source of anxiety and unhappiness for so long, like on that roller coaster.
Yeah, if you don't celebrate and fill up your cup, you're going to burn yourself out. And that's what I've found is that if you're not celebrating your own successes and your own milestones, nobody else gives a shit. No one cares. It's just you and yourself and what those things mean. And if you're not celebrating, I think we can end up being resentful and bitter and burnt out. And then why are we doing this at all? Obviously, your podcast is a passion for you, and it's a way for you to feed yourself somehow, whatever that question is or whatever that need is, and being in alignment with that's really important. But if you're not celebrating why you're doing it and those milestones, then you've forgotten why you're doing what you're doing.
It's easy for me to remember because I'll talk to people and they're great and they're good conversations, but every now and then I meet a Jennifer and it reminds me of exactly why I do this. And it fills me up in this certain way that I can't get anywhere else. And it nourishes me until I get to the next person. It fills me back up. And then, so I could tell I have a kinship with you that I don't with a lot of folks. And this is why I do it, so that eventually I'll find somebody. And I grow as a person. I change as a person. I feel like I'm becoming a better human every time I talk to somebody because I learn more about myself than I honestly probably do about you and your crazy allergies. You are bonkers. I'm not even sure how you're still alive right now. Shouldn't you be wearing a mask, some kind of filtration device right now? You worry me.
Right.
Oh my goodness. But no, I totally get it. And, I was just curious, if you could, do you have any examples of like where you would have some work and you would lean into hard? Like anything in particular? I'm assuming that was probably most of your DA career, right? As you were leaning in the whole time on that.
I mean, it's been everything, honestly. That was just one symptom of this not good enough program, not enough program that I had going, that I saw and inherited and picked up. And, it followed me into my art career. It's followed me into everything that I've done. And I think the blessing was when my body started breaking down, it was a huge red flag. Like, you can't keep doing this. If you want to win the race, which means see where this glorious journey goes, you can't keep doing that because your vehicle's not going to get you there. And so it's required a lot of shifting and a lot of learning about myself to change those things. And, it's one thing when you're 20 something, it's another when you're 40 something, and it's another when you're going to be 60 something. Like what that energy available to you, how that should be used. And I think I was frivolous with it early on, and I paid some prices for it. And now I'm learning other ways of being, which is, when you're kind of a perfectionist, is difficult to put it down. And that's one of my big lessons that I have to learn, is that although I think I can do it all, physically my body won't let me do it all. So I have to back up and think about how I do things and be more mindful, and also honor the part of me that needs to be fed so that it regenerates and we can go on together. I wasn't mindful of that at the beginning, and I was sprinting a marathon, and that's obviously a very poor strategy on running the race, you know?
Yeah, for a lot of my life, yeah, I was just, I like to describe it as I was a zombie, and I was just doing the shamble, right? And I was just
Mm.
going through the motions. And then after my second son was born, 2 weeks later, my wife went to the hospital with like a giant blood clot. And 2 weeks later, we came out of the ICU, and she had like this 30% survival chance, when we
Oh
were
my
in there.
gosh.
And so I don't know, it was so crazy because it was the literal light switch, got flipped. And so many things that were so important, I had this new perspective where I just dropped them and I never went back to them.
Mm.
And it didn't matter anymore. And I've noticed there are some individuals, and it sounds like you hit one of those situations where you were shocked out of, you were Neo, you woke up in the Matrix, you know what I mean? Like you realized what was going on, and you could re-examine things around you and make changes. And I've never met anybody that just naturally came to that conclusion on their own. Like it's always been some major event that's kind of woke them up one way or the other. I don't know. It's kind of unfortunate in that respect. And I've met people too. I've got a friend that she's in her 70s, and I'm still not sure that she's woken up yet from it all. So it's not everybody gets there. So I think
No.
it's fortunate, and I'm so pleased that you found it. But it's always some shitty event that actually was the catalyst for you doing that.
Absolutely. It's, I think I was in a position where I knew what I wanted to do and then shut it down.
Hmm.
And when you're, eighth grade, you're like, 14 or something, around that age. So you're, by a lot of culture standards, you're an adult, you're just a very young adult. So I knew that, and then I shut it down. And philosophy and knowing yourself has always been like a big part of my family and part of my journey. And so I knew it, and I was playing pretend when I was a lawyer. And there was a voice that literally kept whispering to me, is like, you have to be an artist in this lifetime. You have to be. And I didn't know what that meant, but becoming a lawyer, the interesting thing about that was something that I think I just normally can be argumentative. So it normally came easy. But it was one of those things, is like, if I can become a successful lawyer, and this is not something I really want to do, then I can do anything. I mean, maybe that's hubris, maybe that's just arrogance, but I took it and ran, and I said, this practicing law, I mean, I was crying before work every day. I'm not a natural performer. And it was terrifying to me. And I thought, oh, maybe this whole exposure therapy to this, I'll get over it, and all along my life was like, I'll get over this public speaking thing. Not after 3 years, not after 30 trials, not after all of these things. And I'm like, well, when am I going to stop killing myself to fulfill other people's, ideas for myself? Wow. Or when am I going to actually go after what I really want? And so at that point, I really kind of shifted gears and started going after what I wanted. And that was, when I left the law, that was in 2002. So I went to law school for 3 years, practiced for 3 years, and then retired, and started the real journey, actually. And it's not easy either, it's just not easy, but it's the celebrations that you have and the milestones that you pass through on the journey that you're really aligned with mean a lot more than those of, me becoming a district court attorney. Like, I didn't really care about that. Like, oh, it's a bump in salary. Great. I didn't see the value in that, but doing what I'm doing, and like this creative artistic voice, is developing me as a person. And kind of like what you're saying is, like, when you talk with people and kind of commune ideas with people, you learn and kind of become a larger expression of yourself. That's how I feel with the work that I do, is that it expands who I am. And it helps complete my journey. It helps me understand my journey. So that's one of my big whys. Like, I'm trying to make everything in my life in alignment and pull things in that make me tick and that I'm interested in, and then build it and share it. It's second nature. But if you had asked me in 2002 what I was going to be doing in 20 years, I would not have told you that I was building worlds.
That's amazing. That's, for somebody to have like that much, I guess, faith in themselves and bravery to just say, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this one done and I'm going to move on to something else. It's like, I've always been so terrified of things like that, that is like so inspirational. What I'm really curious about is, how'd your parents take it when you told them?
Oh, poorly. Very poorly.
Was that the scariest part, was telling them?
I think what happens is, when you're a really emotive person like I am, you get to the point where you feel discomfort so much and you hold so much of that, is once you make your decision, there is no going back, and you shift. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's not as uncomfortable as being in that position you just pivoted out of. So for me, it was kind of like, too bad. And I also grew up in a household where, we were supposed to be following that inner voice. So there was, in a lot of ways, I felt friction with the ideal that I grew up with, and the practice, the actual practice that was happening. And so when I got in alignment with that which I was taught, which is follow what you're supposed to be doing, and believe in yourself, it was easier for me. It wasn't necessarily easier for my family, but it was easier for me.
Yeah. But you said you thought maybe it was hubris to say, if you could do this, you could do anything. I think that's just plain and simple self-motivation. And that's truthitudes, like, quite literally, if I can handle this thing, if I can be somebody that I'm not for, let's call it what it was, like 6 years, because you did it in college too, and then 3 years on the job. Yeah, I can't imagine you not being able to do anything. So you said that you grew up being like really in touch with your motivations and things. So that's foreign to me. That's something I found much later in life, that I try and, talk to my kids about and stuff like that. But it definitely took me time and energy to get there. So this whole time, you knew what this friction was. You knew that that you were forcing, a square peg into a round hole, and yet you persisted.
I did. And, that shows how strong your family environment is, and even if it's not in concert with your beliefs, what people are willing to do. And, I certainly honor anybody who is stuck in that fly trap, if you will, because it is, when you grow up in a family, those are the survival things that you have, is the love and the affection and the support of your family. That's how you live when you're little. And then even if you do have the thought that I could do other things to break those chains, that's all set in your subconscious. That's your wiring of survival. So to disrupt that is a tremendous effort if you don't really have help, and just kind of coming through that. And you have to kind of build a lot of energy to get out of that, or be in a lot of pain. There's kind of a lot of ways out of it, but it does require a huge amount of energy to shift out of there. It's not just kind of, I'm going to just try this. There's some people that they don't have as many tethers as my experience has, and they're able to pivot easier. But my experience it took a lot. It took a huge amount of being very taxed and kind of very spent and very unhappy in a job that, by all other people's standards, I was doing very well at, and I was a success at, and it was very defining. And I think that was probably my first kind of real tango when I made the decision to leave, with ego death and killing a version of myself, and understanding that people will look at you and value you for what you do. And then when you change that equation, that they don't necessarily change, and then maybe think that you're not quite worth as much, or a failure somehow. And that wasn't the case at all. It was my decision to leave, and for the betterment of me. And a lot of people don't understand that, and I understand that they don't understand that, but it took several ego deaths to understand that it's not their journey. You don't have to worry about them. It's my journey, and I have to worry about me. And it's super painful lesson to learn, man. Super painful.
Something that helped me with that was RuPaul said, and I've learned so much from that dude. He is like so insightful. He's done a lot of work on himself. He's had a lot of work done, if you know what I mean. But he said his mom told him one time that other people's opinion of you is none of your business.
Yep.
And man, I hold that. I've taken that to heart, and I hold that one really close, and that one helps me through. But when you're talking about like your family, like that wasn't like a thing for me growing up. Like I didn't have that sense of like strong cohesive family, and it sounds like your family had like a gravity to it. And to escape that gravity, you had to have a lot of velocity. And so it took you time to build up enough speed to break free from it and get out there and just kind of do your own thing. The idea of ego death, being okay with letting go of who you used to be. Do you think you went through like stages of grief associated with that? Like letting those old parts go?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just like you could see, it was interesting when I became an artist, and you're hawking your wares, and you're doing art festivals, and you're showing your work at places. People would be like, yeah, you're an artist, and they'd see your work. And my work is a little bit iconoclastic. It didn't really follow within a box of impressionism or realism or whatever. It's just kind of my own style. And it would be funny because I would talk to people, and I would say something, and, well, how would you get here would be one of the questions. I was like, well, I used to be a lawyer. And their whole demeanor would change. And the way they would listen to me would be different. And I'm like, oh, that still holds cachet with people. Yeah. Even though it wasn't really who I was, the fact that I did it held cachet. And what I learned is, for me, the fact that I was a lawyer, the best part of that is it makes an interesting story. And I met some wonderful people and had some wonderful experiences. But for me, like the day-to-day thing is that I am the writer of my own story. And I have made it very colorful by doing the choices that I have, and that's one of them. And so I don't mind talking about it. But it was like being somebody else for sure, and using a different part of my brain for most of the time. My creativity served me when I was telling the stories to my juries and that sort of thing. But I think that's why I stopped painting, is I wasn't exercising that creative side of myself, and I was largely using the logical side and looking kind of at the hard part of humanity, which is what I signed up for. I wanted to see what this whole thing was about. And, like, why are people doing these horrible things to one another? And there's no better way to see it at the front line than be in the trenches and looking at cases and watching families go through. You start in like county court, and you have third-degree assaults, misdemeanor assaults, and DUIs. And then I went to juvenile division and saw the kids of the families that were in county court with the DUIs and third-degree assaults. And then when you went to felony court, then you saw those families again, and you just realize it's like a gradient and a cycle, and the children just get wrapped up in it. And I saw how that worked, and I realized that I couldn't really make that much of a difference, and that it was kind of like a hopelessness cycle in many ways, though there are people doing great work out there. But I was like, I'm not really changing anything. And so the why that I had became even less, like I thought I was affecting good change, and there was some. But then when I realized that this cycle was bigger than me and these families and these communities, I was like, and then I was getting jaded from it. I was like, wouldn't it be better for me to shift out of this and start, instead of focusing on the negative stuff, is focusing on the positive stuff and trying to affect change there? And wouldn't it feel better to me to be more in alignment with that? And that helped fuel the change.
I love that. That phrase, affecting change. That's what I try and instill in my kids. It's like, don't complain. Use that energy to do something to change where you're at. Do something that, you've got so much emotional capital every day that you can spend, and why not spend it towards something that can actually affect change in your life or in others' lives to make it better in some form of fashion.
Yeah. It's a great lesson to have.
That's interesting. So yeah, like the idea that you went in there with, an open mind to try and see what you could adjust. That's awesome. That's noble. Yeah, like you said, it's not for everybody. It's so funny. I used to have a very different view on like the criminal justice system and incarcerated people and stuff like that. And, I would call them, they're convicts, right? And so whenever I would give them a name like that, it kind of made them less than human, right? They weren't real people to me anymore. And I started listening to this podcast called Ear Hustle. It's recorded by the inmates in San Quentin. And I started hearing these stories from these real humans about, how they are people and they have these thoughts and feelings and hopes and wants just like everybody else. And, you'll hear some of the stories about where they came from. Exactly like you said, those cycles of poverty, abuse, violence. And, why would we be surprised that they would turn out any other way? They've been shaped and formed and molded in that fashion. And then, they become these people that do bad things. And it's so humanizing to hear how they come in at like 18 and they have to grow up there. Some of them never had fathers. They have to find a father figure in prison. I mean, that's as crazy as that sounds. And they have to grow up and learn how they did wrong from right. And then 20 years later, they are absolutely a different person. Like some people say, people never change. But if you think I'm the same person I was 5 years ago, you're wrong. And if you are still the same person, you're living your life wrong. You should be always changing and molding. And so, yeah, that definitely, it changed the way I look at the world just entirely. I love it when I think something and then somebody can challenge me and I feel like my eyes are open for the first time, right? And I see something completely different. Like that thrills me in a way that nothing else does, to actually be able to change.
It's a total gift, A lot of people are threatened by that, though. And especially when it kind of contradicts things that they've held for a long time. So I think it speaks worlds when anybody, you, me, anybody can see something new and a new possibility, show up for themselves. Because oftentimes it takes moving kind of foundational things that are in there, that's your filter of the world. So, it's not an easy thing to change. I think you have to practice being open. And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. Once you involve fear into anything, that shuts you down even more. And to have a conversation where there's something new and novel and very different that doesn't follow kind of the party line, if you will, is super threatening. And that's been a really interesting thing to see over the last year, is the polarization of thought that's happened in our country. And if you look at it through that lens, that, you know, one, that's a difficult thing to learn how to do, is be really open to totally new thought that's not something that you're used to. And then you add that fear into it, and that shuts you down even more. It explains a lot about what we're seeing and what we have seen. And I wish more people could just go in and do some exercises. It's like, how can we be open to what other people think? And I know everybody has like the best of intentions. That's the whole thing. We have this layer of, you know, I'm a good person, I've got these really good intentions, but we're also a biological creature.
Absolutely.
And we have these survival skills and filters that we're living in, and that's our truth. But we don't regularly take those apart and try something else on. And if you're not used to doing that, being able to see another person's point of view through their eyes even is almost an impossibility in a lot of ways. So, you know, as an artist, that's what I think one of the most beautiful things is about the practice of being an artist, is you look at a piece of work and you see someone's lens and how they see the world. And then you can look at another artist right next to that and see how radically different and maybe equally as beautiful. And I think it's just kind of a beautiful metaphor, is that we have people from all around the world, and even within our communities, all very different ways of thinking. And there's trappings of thinking one way is the only way. And it isolates us, and I don't think it makes us stronger. I think it limits us in a lot of ways. That I think was the most distressing thing for me as we have walked through this whole crazy last year and a half, 2 years, is that we're in this situation and we've forgotten how to talk to one another.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's in the same thread as that one, but I've noticed how people are letting their fear override their ability to care for other people and to worry about other people. They're so afraid that all they can concentrate on is themselves. And it kind of, I don't know, makes me sad, you know, that they'd rather operate out of fear than think of themselves as part of a community and all this in this together and try and take care of other people. You know, it's the idea of like, if I was walking along the street and I saw you like laying down bleeding, like I would stop and help you, you know. And a lot of this stuff, it's the exact same thing, you know. It's just sometimes you can't always see the wounds, you know, so you just have to be open and, you know. And the idea that you were talking about, when people have something that's a belief they hold very deeply, whenever you challenge that belief, it actually kicks off their biological fight or flight response. So, I mean, all of the same chemicals are released in their body as if they're being attacked by somebody. So it makes sense why they would have these visceral responses to them. And it's, I don't know if it's maybe, how can we approach people in a different way that doesn't, you know, kick that off, or I think, like you said, part of it is training yourself to be more open and available. What is it? I think Neil Armstrong said, the mind is like a parachute. It only works if it's open. So I thought, you know, because there's people in my life that I wish I could convince them of one thing or another. And, you know, I think just being slightly open, I try and go the slight nudge approach, where I just give them slight nudges, never push them one direction or the other, just introduce ideas and say, oh, maybe you could think about that. Or, you know, definitely, for me, something that absolutely works is listening to them, you know, and being genuinely interested in what they have to say and how they think and feel about it, and hoping that they'll reciprocate when I, you know, want to tell them my viewpoint. Yeah,
I think part of that is the nudge, it has to be gentle. I think anything that works has to be gentle. You can't use force because people meet force with force. But I like the lead by example, you know. I think that, for instance, my family had a great deal of fear that I wouldn't be able to support myself in this artistic realm. And that was not my fear. My fear was just not living the life that I was supposed to be living. Wow. And being in touch with the energy and the source I was supposed to have, you know, and living a lie. And so I'm certainly concerned where my paycheck's coming from, those sort of things, but I'm more concerned with, does my heart sing, or have I become a zombie? Wow. You know? And so that's, for me, is if I'm willing to do the work to walk this life. I could never convince anybody else to do these type of big changes, but maybe by talking about it and sharing it is other people can see, oh, it can be done, you know? And maybe they don't make such a drastic choice, but maybe they make some choices like, well, I don't want to do that full time, but I do want to explore this creative side of me, or this other side of me that speaks to me, but I don't give it time or energy. And I, you know, that's what I think the beauty about what you're doing is that you're talking to people about how they got there and who they are along the way and what shifted them. And it's kind of a roadmap to the human condition. Like, how do we move through this kind of journey? And what are the decisions people are making? And people make decisions for all different reasons, and they have all different kinds of outcomes. So what does that look like? And I think when you kind of demystify it and look at it from, you know, at heart, the part of one of the strongest parts of me is my 4-year-old self drawing those candles at the table. I remember her, and she's with me, and I follow that sense of surety. I haven't forgotten that, and that has helped me hold on to who I am, or who I want to be. I mean, because I was a lawyer, you know, and I had a big crisis with, like, who am I? I stopped painting and stopped creating, and because I had started severing those lines. And I mean, I can't even imagine if I had practiced for the last 20 years, almost 20 years, who I would be. But it certainly wouldn't look as colorful as it does now.
You know, and I look back at somebody who's done a lot of things in the past, and it feels like you don't really regret any of that, because it gave you perspective. And for me, that's one of the most important things. I've worked a lot of jobs that made me absolutely miserable. Like, I would wake up in the morning, I feel like I was going to throw up every day before I went to work, you know, that kind of stuff. And it has given me so much perspective that now that I'm in a place where I'm happy, that I wouldn't cherish it, I wouldn't enjoy it the way I do now if I hadn't seen what it's like on the other side, you know. And so I work with guys that it's like the thing that they dread the most is the thing I enjoy the most about the job. It's, you know, it's just because, I don't know, they've never been at a place where they were truly miserable, I guess. You know, it's just you sometimes you got to find rock bottom, I guess, maybe in life to
absolutely
enjoy it. But I definitely, a life well lived is what I would say about you. You've done a lot of interesting things, and like I told you, I like what did I say? I like degenerates. So yeah, you definitely fall in that. No, I like interesting people who've done interesting things and tried stuff. I've learned later in life that what is it? A life unexamined is a life wasted. I think somebody told me that one time, and I definitely believe that. And you were talking about looking at art through different lenses, and I think 10 years ago me, I would look at art, and generally art that I liked had symmetry. It had patterns and repeating things, and I think I think a lot of people enjoy that stuff. But now when I look at art, I, instead of enjoying patterns and symmetry, I feel things from it. And that was something I didn't learn to do, was to feel, until much later in life. And it's so funny how entirely different my lens is, and how much more I'm enjoying things now than I ever thought was possible. And it's all through just, like you said, being open-minded. I say yes to a lot of things. Obviously, you say yes to some stuff you probably shouldn't, otherwise you wouldn't be talking to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, part of that is just being open, taking chances. And the idea of you saying that you're afraid of public speaking, here you are talking to me, a complete stranger, and you seem so at ease. So that seems so foreign. It sounds like some of that exposure therapy may have worked a bit.
It's fine once I get going, but it's like that. Like this morning, I was looking over notes and like just, you know, I listened to previous podcasts and what to expect and like uncovering the unknown. And this isn't really public speaking. I'm having a conversation with you. And then it's gonna, other people will hear it eventually. But when you get up and like as an attorney, you get up and you're trying to win this case because you have a victim, and then all of these things happen and you think you're doing the right thing, a lot's at stake.
A lot of pressure.
And yeah, a lot of pressure. And it's, I mean, pressure that's there, and then more pressure that I put on myself. And then when you meet your victim and you build a relationship with them and see their pain and feel their pain, it's a lot. And being an artist with not very solid boundaries, you know, you just take all of that on. So, you know, I've had to learn to put up boundaries and still be empathetic and in touch with people, because it's a superpower too. But you have to make yourself safe within the space of exploring other people. And that's all very complicated when you come from a world where everybody's enmeshed and everybody's feeling everybody else's feelings all the time. And that's really hard to suss out what's yours and what's not, and what's your responsibility and what's not. And it's been one of those things for me that has been real difficult to figure out, and what's healthy and what's not. But I could tell you that just that job, there wasn't enough that it gave to me that made it worthwhile. But certainly just by leaving it doesn't mean that lesson was learned. It follows you until you learn it. It shows up in different ways over and over and over again until you're done with it. And there's a cyclical pattern to it. It's very Fibonacci. It's very natural, seasonal sort of thing, which is kind of why I like nature. I think we are part of nature. We are like a Fibonacci piece of nature, and we see the same cycles that come back. They're just relevant to our human condition. And so it's in some ways very soothing to know that there's a rhyme and reason to it. And it's also terrifying. It's like, if you haven't fixed it here, it's going to come right back and bite you in the ass again. So maybe you shouldn't worry too much because it'll be back, or maybe you should just get it done now when it's real big.
Something you said there, I circled it 3 times. You said, what's yours and what's not. I found myself in a conversation a few weeks ago where I was talking to somebody, and I usually try and be like super open when I'm having conversations with folks. And they went down a path, and it just kind of repelled me the whole time. And I was like, I couldn't quite figure out what was going on there. And until I reflected upon it later, it was like, there was like a heat radiating off of them. It wasn't hate. It was kind of like a simmering rage. And it was like, I realized my repulsion is like, I don't want to feel that. So I wouldn't I was starting to turn it off, and I didn't realize that what it was, which I was like good and bad. And it was like, wow, that's amazing. I wonder why it was so, like, I don't know why I couldn't figure that out in the moment, but I was so glad I did it, because it's like, I don't need that energy in me. Like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to take that on. And, what's yours and what's not, I mean, I'm such a visual person. I like a good phrase. So the idea of that really fits in so clearly and so cleanly with that. Like, because sometimes it's me feeling it's like I didn't do it for most of my life. And so it's like this fire hose situation. I'm learning to moderate it, but it's usually all on or all off. And so it's been kind of this interesting journey for me. And so I'm learning to put the brakes on, and it's sort of new to me and weird. And that is such like a clear indication, because I can take on other people's like feelings, and I'll carry them with me for like a couple hours, and I'll feel a different way, and it's not always the way I want to feel. And so, yeah, definitely learning to temper that stuff. Did it take you a while to kind of figure all that out?
I'm still terrible at it. I'm still terrible. Like, I think my first, I think we all start out, you've had little ones, is we feel everything, like that's our first thing. We can't really see, but we feel, and we feel ourselves first, and then we feel out into the world. So we all start out as empaths. And then that slowly, as our senses come in, as we can rely on other things, and we start to reason out kind of, that's not me. And it's just a real interesting journey when you don't learn those things, like when you're held responsible for other people's feelings. It's really hard to suss that out, what's yours and what's not. You come from this tank of rules, your family, when you're growing up, and it is what it is. It's not until you leave that you start to see, oh, okay, that's not necessarily everybody's experience. And maybe that's not the most healthy thing for me. Maybe that was just other people's pain talking, and you picking it up because you, as a very young child, you need to be in tune with everybody around you for survival. So for me, it's an ongoing process, and it's required a lot of work and a lot of introspection. And when you have one of those aha moments that you're like, oh, I didn't understand this basic thing that everybody else that's kind of coming from a different, maybe a healthier experience gets. How can I know when that's never been my experience?
Right.
And that was the guidebook I was going from. So it's an ongoing journey, and it's not my strength in the sense that I've got it down, but it is a strength in the sense that being an artist that creates environments that are trying to get other people to emote, then it's a superpower. I just don't have a boundary with it, and I know what I feel. And I can put that into an environment maybe easier than other people. So, there's like always two sides to that coin. And it's interesting that I'm doing this kind of work now as I'm kind of cleaning up some of those things.
So talk to me a little bit about Prismagic, because it seems like it's all about building like an immersive experience. And I know we're talking about art and things like that, but it seems like, from like researching it and talking to you, that the experience is probably the most important part to you. So talk to me a little bit about that and why that is so important for you.
Well, I think any art, whether it be, installation work or a painting or a piece of music, a piece of dance, at the core, there's an emotional component to it. The modality of painting for me, some people got what I was trying to do, but it wasn't as effective as I wanted it to be. And so I started piling up all the senses onto things and naturally kind of going into building experiences. Prismagic, our first public installation, was called Natura Obscura, which meant hidden nature. The logo was a modified Rorschach or ink blot that had an owl in it, and it looked like a clearing in the woods and mushrooms and things like that. So if you looked deeper in it, you got to see more and more. which is kind of what we're talking about, is kind of diving into something and kind of picking it apart and discovering things. So there was this path through the experience, you kind of started in a cave, which was the metaphor for, the womb and being born into the world. And then you walked through trees and you were in this forest. You saw these major elements, earth, wind, fire, those sort of elements. So there's like a lot of archetypal work, Jungian work, if some have called it. And hidden nature, we gave you magic flashlights, UV flashlights, and your job was to discover things and go through, and your phone interacted with some things as well. And the things that you were discovering, there were I think there were about 30 quotes, some from scientists, some from naturalists, some from spiritual non-denominational teachers, some from like Buddha, some from poets like Rumi, but all speaking to truths, whether it's about Mother Nature or our own personal nature. So there was a double entendre going on there. And it was from all different perspectives, because we wanted to meet as many people as we could on their journey, meet them where they are, and things that would make sense to them. And I'm not a religious person, I'm just a spiritual person. And if I find truth somewhere, I don't really care where it comes from. Truth is truth, my truth, right? And so that was their job, was to explore the space, and they were finding these quotes in the trees, on the floors, everywhere. And so Joseph Campbell, a comparative mythologist whose work I really enjoy, talked about the woods as the subconscious. And so you were walking basically through your subconscious and finding your own pieces of your own internal nature. And so what ended up being this project with over 30 artists became very much, I didn't realize it at the time, but it came very much like me walking my journey through my life. And those quotes were kind of some of the final pieces we put in that really kind of congealed it for me, is that you want to create something that people feel at ease and at home in, and a certain sensibility, but you also want, or at least I would like, people to get a hint at what we're doing, which is trying to get people to look inside themselves and find meaning for themselves and connect to a piece because they see themselves in it. So, yeah, it's super important. It's my why, is I'm on this journey, I'm doing this thing, I'm trying to create beauty, but there needs to be something deeper. And it is my biggest joy when somebody else understands that my journey might be intersecting with their journey or in tandem. They have different things that light them up, but we're all walking on that same path through the same woods, and we're seeing the same things. And what we walk away with might be slightly different, but in large part, we're all having the same experience, same types of obstacles, love, hate, fighting, joy, ecstasy. And so I think it's just as good as reason as anything to be doing, but somehow it's making a lot of sense to me. And those past 20 years of taking all these dramatic turns and trying to find my way, and now I find my way on this path of using all of the things I have together and building these environments and then sharing it, and then other people getting it and seeing themselves in it. I don't know. It's just very satisfying.
What's that feedback loop like? Do you see people as they're walking through this, or do you see them when they've, gone through the installation, and like where? Because I'm assuming, all art is created to be seen by somebody else or appreciated, but you also need that feedback, right, to feed you as well. So where do you like, at what point of the process are you getting feedback? Do you kind of occasionally walk through while people are there and just sort of watch them, or what are you doing?
With Natura, that happened a couple times because we were at that point fundraising for a permanent facility, and so we would be taking potential investors through, and I got to see some people in real time find quotes that really meant something to them, and then it was just like a beautiful conversation you would have with them about how they felt seen and how they connected with the work. In Shiki Dreams, which we still have running, because of COVID, we had to let all of our staff go. And so my business partner, Eric, and I have been running that ourselves the whole time. So we're interacting with everybody that comes through the exhibit. And just on Sunday, I was working the exhibit, and I had a woman come by who is a dream therapist. And she didn't know why she came the way she did, but she went in, and there is one room inside that I've had many people come out of. When they get into that room, they start to cry. And that's happened, I don't know how many times, but she spent some time in there, and we came out and we were talking about how these kind of environments can be therapeutic, and like she integrated something, and when you have all of the senses and beauty and symbolism and everything, it's almost like it just kind of goes into you. So those are my favorite, when people really understand that it's not just we're making these environments and then there's a storyline with it, but there's something deeper there for you. And you don't have to get it at that level to enjoy the experience, but there's something down super deep there that I'm putting into my work because it's my life's work. And then when they get it, oh, that's the best. That's totally the best. And, you have these beautiful conversations, really intimate conversations with people and where they are in their journey. And you can see that they've been shifted by it. And like, we're hugging at the end, like, that's amazing. That's amazing that art can have that kind of impact on people, and that really the love and attention and emotion we're putting into these things is showing up for people and connecting with people. I mean, there's not a how to do that. There's no book on how to do it. You don't push A plus B plus C together and do it. So I don't know. I don't know how we're doing it, except for that's our intention, and it's showing up for people. And so that's such a huge payoff for me, is to see people really shifted by it and really following what we're doing and really invested in it. And it means it's got value. It's not just entertainment, but it's an experience. It's a real experience for people. And I can't architect their response to that experience. I can just lay the groundwork for people to feel safe enough and put the things in place so that they can have the experience. So I don't know, it's in some ways, it's like a crazy honor to watch people shift in something that you've birthed. And your intention is to have people shift, but you can't control them. So it's wild. It's really wild.
What that makes me think of is what we talked about earlier. You're making small nudges, and these tiny nudges. And 10 years from now, that person's going to be on a completely different path because you put the time and energy and the attention, and the thought into what you're doing. You're putting it there. And I love, too, the idea that you can't tell people how to enjoy things. They're going to enjoy them in the way they want. And I bet everybody you talk to pulled something completely different out of it, right? It meant something different to them, right? All predicated on their past experiences. And you have no way, ultimately, of knowing, how that experience changed them. But I bet for a lot of them, if you could come back 5 or 10 years and talk to them, I bet there would be something tangible that they still hold with them, right? And the fact that you're touching all these people, you're planting all of these seeds and all those people, that's so amazing. Like, to be able to do that.
It's big. It's big, like, it was a lofty idea. I mean, it seems arrogant to say that that's what your intention is. You want to really touch people
Why is
in a
that
profound
arrogant?
way. I don't know, like that you can, like that you would know how, like, I don't know how we're doing it. We're just doing it.
I think that's it right there. You're doing it. You want to do it, and you're trying. You're giving it your damnedest. You're giving it everything you got, and you're too big to fail.
Well, that's nice to hear.
You know what I mean? It's like, would you have that much love for what you do, that much intention in every action you take, how could you go wrong?
Yeah, well, you can.
Yeah, I think you could go hungry, you could go homeless, but I don't imagine you could go wrong in that endeavor.
It's been such a journey, and I've tried so many different things to get to this. I was trying to do it through painting. I was trying to do it through a lot of different modalities, and it wasn't until I realized that there's so many different kinds of people, and there's so many skill sets you need to do to build a world, that I couldn't possibly, it was too big of an idea for me to do by myself. And I wanted to do an expression. I wanted it to be expressive in ways that it would appeal to many people. And I have a certain point of view, but I needed to bring in more people with more skill sets. And that's when it took off. And that's kind of, like Prismagic is prism and magic put together. And so, this piece of glass that can split light into all different colors, that was always something that kind of dazzled me. And then the magic that each one of us has. Everybody has their own energy that they bring to things. And that's kind of how I look at my team, is each one of them has something really special to share with us. And then, so it's this multicolored experience with all of these different kinds of magic that come together. And, I've got some of these ideas, but I don't have all the magic. My team has so much magic, and, they come in and do what they love and what they're really good at. And it's a beautiful place for them to celebrate that, and see it all come together. And a lot of times they're going on faith, because I'm like, I got this crazy idea and I'm going to build this thing, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it. But you over here, know how to work with this material, and you know how to work with this material. And I kind of want it to look like that. And so everybody is bringing their best foot forward and putting it all in a pot, and we move towards it. And God, that's so much fun and terrifying. It's so much fun. And just to see people really get to do what they're supposed to be doing, to do it. I mean, that's super juicy. That's super great. And, the vibe that can happen on the job site can get really good. There's days where it's really good. There's days where it's really fucking shitty too, but there's days where it's really good. And that is what I go back for, and just putting people in the right seat on the bus, and so that they can do what they're supposed to do and vibe at the highest vibe that they have. It's rad. It's really another part of this whole journey that is so good for me to see the positive effect it has. I've worked with some people since like 2016, and they just keep coming back, and they get to see their skill sets grow. And we're doing new stuff all the time. So they're learning, and they're bringing the stuff that they've learned while they haven't been with us back. I don't know. It's like a beautiful homecoming every time we're back together. And then we always have new people too. So there's that part. I don't really know how to distill it, but I love the build as much as it tears me down because I put so much in it. I love my people. Oh my gosh. And what they bring and what they show me. And And some of them that I've been working with and working with and working with for a long time, it's just, they're part of my spiritual family.
That's interesting. Something you just said there, what they show me. So you're the mom and they're 4 years old and they've just painted that picture of those candles. And instead of saying, yeah, that's okay, you're saying, yeah, that's amazing. I can't believe you created that.
Yeah.
So you're feeling that little bit of hole. But also I was thinking too, that it sounds like, because earlier you were talking about how tough it was for you to do the public speaking, but this speaks in a voice. It's not even that, it's you singing in such a way that you're doing it to hundreds and thousands of people that you were never meant to do in that other way. But this is your medium. This is how you were meant to do it. And you found it, and everything's vibrating at just the right frequency.
Yeah.
And it all harmonizes. I love that.
Yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day long.
Oh,
This is the thing, right? But this is, for me, like the truth is like, who are we? What makes us tick? What makes us happy? Getting everybody in the right seat on the bus, you know, so that that's how they tick, that's how they're happy. And, you know, I think we're all on this planet to figure out, like, we have things to learn here. And a lot of people live a compartmentalized life. You know, when I was a lawyer, I was lawyering, you know, in court and trial. And there was very little time to think like this. And now this, thinking like this and exploring these things is not only a large part of my job, but it's a large part of my life. So those things are integrated. And I'm super interested in learning more about myself. And I get to do that by seeing my team and seeing them meet challenge and go through that. And I'm doing the same thing right alongside of them. And I've seen them pick me up and have a great deal of grace towards me. And I've seen them do the same towards each other. And it's just really beautiful to me to be in that. And yeah, I can't think of a better way I'd want to spend my time, honestly.
Do you get a lot of artists that are young, kind of just really starting to explore their art and their career? On
Natura, we did it as part of a program with the museum where we took on 11 interns. So I had been used to working with a team of people, and I had to kind of move them aside a little bit. They worked in tandem, but the lion's share of the physical work that was done by a team of 11 new people. And my youngest on that team at the time was 18. And the oldest was in their mid-30s. So I do. I actually prefer to work with older artists because of the nature of what we're doing. And I think when you're 18, you're just learning about life and being independent. You're not really diving deep. And we're talking about all this deep stuff on the job site, you know, and like real stuff. Like it's in the ether. And so it's harder to be talking about such things with somebody who's younger. They're more like learning the skill sets of like how to do this. And really what's happening is an alchemy of like how we relate to the world. I mean, that's just like in the soup on the job site. So it's a little bit more difficult, though I don't shy away from working with young people, but I think that it's probably more difficult for them to relate to what's going on. They want to see a picture and be able to recreate that picture. That's the stage they're in. And I want them to see into the picture and feel into the picture and then understand everything that's supposed to be going on underneath that picture and then create there. And they can do it. They absolutely, I'm super impressed by what my team did. But I think that they want to party, they want to rock. Just sounds super old about it. And I totally get that energy, but that's like leaning in, and that's like all of this unbridled kind of hormones, that they have going. And we're more subtle, And so it's easier for me to work with people who they don't have to have a lot of art experience. They just need to have a lot of life experience. I don't care if they're kind of a newer person in the practice of art. That's fine. But it's the kind of like feeling into it, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. That's the creative juice I need to have from them. If they can manipulate that for themselves. I don't know how it gets in there. It's transmuted somehow into the spaces.
I love that. That went a direction I entirely didn't expect. It's fascinating. So like, I've always been a technical person. Like, I've been in kind of an IT field forever. And I found like whenever you're managing younger folks, there's good and bad, right? One of the good things is they don't know it anyway, right? Like if they're in their 30s, they already have their way of doing things, right? And so sometimes you have to kind of retrain, and that can be a little difficult. Whereas the young folks, they'll do it however you tell them to do it, right? You can influence a little bit more. But then also, I've noticed that they have like, executive development to do like anybody else, but they also have all this personal development because they're so young. They just, like you said, they don't have that life experience. And so they're learning why you don't yell at people at work, or, why you don't do basic things. And you have to work through it. So it is more work and sometimes exhausting, but sometimes feels more rewarding. But in the context you're talking about, that absolutely 100% makes sense to me. Like I didn't really become introspective until I was in my 30s and really start examining myself and the things around me in that way, so it definitely makes sense. Because like when I was young, I was kind of on autopilot. I was just doing as much as I could, as fast as I could, I guess. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a different way to look at it. And I want to have somebody who's had a lot of life experience. For me, is super helpful. The skill sets, we can get those down, and I don't worry about that. A lot of times I will design things that it doesn't take a huge amount of skill to do. Like you don't have to have 20 years in something. And we're using really humble materials, and we're manipulating them in ways that people aren't accustomed to seeing them. So that's always fun too. There's like a little bit of mad scientist in there, but the what you bring by way of perspective, like my team is so varied, so very varied with what we talk about, and it's just really fun to see like people living the way they've been living and being the way they've been, and then everybody coming together and kind of like talking, oh, this is going on, and trading conversation around it. It's in some ways it's like, I don't want to make it sound too heady, but like a spiritual think tank. At least that's how I relate to it. And somebody else might relate totally different to it. And we're talking, and I might be doing most of the talking about like, this is what's going on, and people weighing in, or we're talking about aliens or something, you know what I mean? Like, but I walk out of there like energetically charged up relative to that stuff. And I love seeing people's different perspectives that have been honed for years and years, and changed and polished. And for me, it's super refreshing to see the young ones too, like fresh out of it and like going after it. It's charming.
All that energy, their bodies don't ache. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And true pleasure is the absence of pain.
And they haven't been beaten down by the world yet, they're real optimistic. And that's a beautiful energy to have too, and it's intoxicating. But we like to dive deep. So I find there's more conversation there when people have been through the shit and they've survived it. And the wisdom that they bring forward, I'm learning from my whole team in a myriad of ways. And I don't know if they're learning. I would assume because everybody is talking that way, we're all learning from one another too.
How do you go about growing your team? Like, do you just randomly find people sometimes and invite them in, or like, how does that work?
A lot of people that come through the experience actually talk with me afterwards, and they ask how they can get involved. It's a different than other immersive experiences that we work, because I design everything to a certain degree. And then I might curate in a couple of artists to do their own thing that fits within the aesthetic I'm trying to achieve. But everybody else, anything that's built, many people touch it. So it's very different in the sense that there's a lot less ego in it. It's like, we're not like featuring one particular artist. This particular piece is built by 7 people, let's say, so it becomes, what I found is it becomes really cooperative. That ego kind of pulls away and it becomes very cooperative, and it's a problem solving process. So everybody brings their best forward. Nobody's holding anything back. And I think much of our team loves one another for that, and even if they're super different, they're like, they can see the value in one another because somebody figured out that problem. Somebody brought that piece to it. A lot of it, we've got artists going, and then we have people that are more on the technical side that are bringing electronics to it. The app, Sean builds the app, and, that's a whole other layer to everything. So, I think everybody's learned how to make room for the other so that the end product is like that much better than if just 1 or 2 people were working on it. I think that's some of the magic that happens, is that you see each of them support the other. And it's really cool.
Were you always good, like traditionally good at asking for help from other people?
Oh, terrible. The worst.
I had the sneaking suspicion.
Worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the worst for me. But again, the fact that my team is so supportive of one another and of me, and I try to be of them, it helps me a lot. It really helps me a lot, and it inspires me to be better.
That's what they say. That's part of being a good friend, right? Like, if you're the kind of person that if anybody asked you to do anything, you would drop everything and you would help them. If you're that kind of person, you have to also know being a good friend means you have to reciprocate. So you have to be okay asking people for help as well, and accepting that from them, because we as humans, it brings us joy to help other people, to help lift other people up. And that's such a hard lesson to learn for people that are, I still have problems asking for help. I am so much better that I'm night and day different than I used to be, but I still have problems with it. That's so weird how something so simple as asking for help can be so difficult. That could be sometimes the hardest thing for me to do.
Yeah, me too. I think that I heard this phrase, I'm sure I'm going to get it a little bit wrong, but it's receiving the gift honors the gift giver. And I have to look at that a lot and understand that it's not because I'm not enough and I can't do enough. That's where my reticence comes from. But it's the cooperative nature of what we're doing, the scale of what we're doing, and the joy that the people that are participating get. I've had to be reminded several times. My team have been really good about reminding me in really gracious ways is that me asking for help is actually doing something for them too.
Oh,
They get to
absolutely.
participate. And I always worry that they're not going to think I'm grateful for all of the gifts that they bring. Because their projects are all over the board, you know, like sometimes they're well funded and sometimes they're not. And I don't ever want anyone to say that the dollar value that I can offer them is indicative of the actual value that I think it is and what I think they're worth. So that's another thing I'm learning. And I'm very grateful for the lessons that they're willing to share with me and their perspectives, because it's making me better, you know, and it's making my point of view much more faceted and encompassing of maybe what the reality of things are.
That's awesome. You are so introspective. You've obviously put time and energy into thinking of this. Otherwise, you are an amazing improv artist. I'm not sure which of the two it is, or perhaps a bit of both. That's pretty awesome.
Well, that's very nice to hear. The improv thing is probably not true.
Oh man. What's I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm just curious, like, what is, if you even have one, what's your favorite part of the process? Like, what excites you? Like, when you think, is it I'm getting ready to do something and I'm kind of trying to build up an idea of what it's going to be? Does that excite you? Is it the actual thinking about it, musing? Is it the implementation piece? Is it the completion? Like when you get to say, Mario said whenever he writes the end, you know, on his first draft, that's like, you know, probably like one of his most celebrated moments.
That's such a great question. And I'm going to answer it in a complicated way, because
I like complicated.
Yeah. I think every step of the process has highs and lows. I mean, because, you know, like Natura took from 2017 to 2019 to build. So that's a long, long process, and it's part of its business, part of its creative, part of it's logistic, part of it's just buying stuff, you know. So the buying stuff can be amazing sometimes. Like you find a new product and you're like, whoa, this is super cool. We can do this and this and this with it. So you get super jazzed about it. You know, the business part, which is more my business partner's part, Eric, can be amazing too. Like you have to celebrate that. And like, he does a lot of the heavy lifting when it's sourcing investors and finding the money. And, but we get to dream every time we're talking to an investor and like think about where we want to go. And so that has got some really beautiful and satisfying parts in it. I love when an idea comes together, like a whisper of ideas show up and they keep bothering me. And I don't know what it's about. And then when it comes all the way through, that's magic. Like, and I know exactly what it's about. Like, I'm like, holy shit, that all makes sense now. The puzzle piece is in place. I don't know how that possibly got to me. You know, sometimes I feel like I channel ideas and I don't know what they're about until I know what they're about. And that's super cool. I mean, it's kind of an addictive thing. Like I want to know. Sometimes it's when the story comes together, because I don't necessarily write the story ahead of time. Sometimes we don't even have the design. Like for Shiki, we didn't have the whole design done. We designed that in 2 weeks. We built it in 6.5. The story didn't come until after. And it all makes sense. And I saw that early on when I was painting. I would paint something and I wouldn't know what it was about. And then I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, that's what that's about. So some of that is like, it's going to sound like I'm the blind leading the blind, but it's true in a lot of ways. I feel like there's somebody else, something else that is throwing things, and it's really my job to pay attention. And then when it comes together, it comes together. So that's really, for a type A personality who likes to have a lot of control, and that being one of my favorite things about my job, it's really this kind of opposite that maybe I'm trying to get closer to. But I love that there's something at hand that knows where we're going. And I don't have to be responsible for every little bit.
It makes sense. It's like the act of letting go is what gets you there. And no matter how tight you try and hold it or how much you try and force the process, it's never going to happen. You just have to kind of let it go and it'll come to you. Like you said, that being a conduit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But it's still like weird to wrap your mind around, especially when it's happened many, many, many times. And it's like every single process we're doing something bigger or more new in some way. And so my natural reaction is to try to hold on to it. But what really happens is I get completely overwhelmed and it comes together anyways. And I don't know what that is, but I'm in love with it. And I love it. I love that I can make wrong decisions for sure, and we've had to back out of things because they haven't come together. But usually it makes room for something better to come in. And then the thing that we weren't able to accomplish shows up down the road better too. So I don't know. It's just, God, it's terrifying to go through every time.
I don't know until you start to embrace it. It makes sense. So like in my life, my successes come because I figured out all the ways to do it wrong until it finally stops doing it wrong, just over and over. That's kind of how I forge a path through life. So it's just, you're just figuring out all the ways not to do it, and then eventually you start finding the ways that do work, right? You just settle in a pattern. You kind of move from there. But it sounds like you break the mold every time you do it, which is awesome.
It's terrifying. And it's awesome.
It sounds exciting as hell.
Both, it is, but when you're like holding like the responsibility of all of it, I mean, everybody, and I shouldn't put it that way because everybody is responsible for their own. I see you deferring the blame. I get it. I'm giving the credit where credit's due, maybe. And I tend to take on more responsibility than I actually need to. So this is part of me reframing so that it's healthier.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But we are always, we learn and we build on some of that, but part of what we're doing is these spectacular ideas that we're like, how do we do that? We don't know. You see something that inspires you, then you add like a whole bunch of other ideas on top of that. And you're like, how are we going to conquer that? And so I'll have an idea about how to do it, but I don't know how to do it. And then we figure it out. And it is terrifying because we're building at a scale where there's financial investment and there's people that we know that are supporting us. And so a lot of that is, you can't just be cavalier about it. So it can be really terrifying and at the same time super exhilarating when we're past the hurdle and we've accomplished it. And it can look totally different than we think. So that I'm not so worried about. I'm just worried about jumping over the ravine, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jennifer, we are at the 2-hour mark, and I want to be extremely respectful of your time because I will literally just sit here and talk to you until you just, pass out from not eating enough or whatever it happens to be. But
we had a big meal at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just go into the food coma. I'll hit you with an EpiPen after everything weird that you've eaten. But I just wanted to tell you that sometimes it's so funny. This is apropos, but in this one, I did research on you and I have maybe 4 things written down on here. I didn't really have much to go on. And sometimes that is my most exciting because I don't know what's going to come out of it. But going into it, just from your emails, you had an energy that I knew this was going to be great and I was going to love this. And I enjoyed talking to you through this whole process. You are exciting to talk to. Like, your energy is so infectious. It's like I'm trying to figure out how I can talk to you more. It's like I need some more of that energy in my life, regular injections. Maybe you could just leave me daily affirmations that I can listen to first thing in the morning. But no, your spirit, your positivity, things you've gone through, talking about how you learn all the ways to not be yourself until you figured out the right ways of being yourself. It sounds like so in alignment with the way you do your art now too. That, you're figuring it out like everybody else. But you're celebrating all the discoveries you've made, and those discoveries don't come easy, right? Those are hard-earned lessons. And I love all the positivity you're putting out there and the energy, and just the fact that you're putting so much of your heart and energy into affecting other people in positive ways. That's so inspiring to me. And I can't thank you enough for your time today. It was so awesome.
Wow. That's really nice. That's really nice. Yeah, I don't really know how to respond. That's a little bit overwhelming and beautiful, and thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation today, Greg, and really hope that you continue to do this work. And I think it's super important, and it sounds like it's important to you. So
absolutely.
Let us know if we can help you in any way.
Well, I hope I've somehow, well, I know how, but I've been meeting a bunch of people in Denver. And so I would love to actually physically meet you people in real life one day. That's like, so I'm technically in sales now, and Colorado's in my region. So the next time I get over there, I think I'm going to try and make a trip to Denver, because I definitely want to meet you folks. But until that time, if you had people that were listening to this and you wanted them to interact with you in some way on the internet, or you wanted to promote something, what's your favorite way for people to find you and the things you do?
Well, we are in the process of building a permanent facility. Well, we're on the very beginning part of the process of building a permanent facility right now. So if anybody is interested in following along, Instagram or Facebook, looking up Prismagic, Prismagic, that would be a great way to start interacting with us. Cheeky Dreams, our latest exhibition, is still running. So they'll be running at least through October. So if you go to our website, which is prismagic.com, you can look up tickets for that. We're open on the weekends currently. And both my business partner and I are working the exhibit on the weekends, so we can directly interface. And Greg, if you're ever through town, please let me know, because I would love to give you a tour of Cheeky Dreams so you can kind of see what I've been talking about.
Excellent. So are you guys still collecting funding for the new facility? Or, I mean, how does, like, if people want to, like, monetarily support you, is that something they can still do?
Right now, we don't have like a Patreon or anything like that yet, because we are, with COVID and everything, our financing shifted with the loans that we had in place pre-COVID are no longer available post-COVID. So we're looking for more investors. We're looking to do a Kickstarter and things like that. But right now, we just decided like a month and a half ago that we're going to pull the trigger on the large facility again. So the best way to interact and follow along is just to follow us on social media. And then we're hoping to have some of those things in place when we know set amounts of what we'll need and how we're going to use that money. I don't want to take anybody's money until I know how we're going to use it and where we're going. So we want to be responsible with the support that we get. So I think that's the safest way right now to interact with us. You can email us through our website, and you can look me up on Facebook.
All right, rock and roll. Yeah, I mean, with your energy, with what you guys are doing, I want to support you however I can, and I'm sure people listening will too. So hopefully they'll do that. Once again, Jennifer, and I'm going to say it, Mosquera.
Mosquera, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. And all of you guys listening, reach out to her. Go see Prismagic, and we'll see you next time. Now I'm going to click
Thanks.
stop on all the things that are